What I'm trying to do is to demonstrate my preferred workflow. And for that, I use, as you can imagine, the latest tools. We've developed a Dyalog. And before I start the demo, I have to introduce to what I'm going to do. The goal is to open a particular project called CommTools, where I'm going to remove some minor technical debt and to fix an issue, a bug. CommTools is a very simple project. It just communicates with the user via quote, quad, and quad. It comprises 5 functions and operators. The function pause prints a message to the session and forces the user to press enter before she can continue. The operators ask for task and ask for number. Well, they do what the name suggests, and so does the function yes or no. Select prints a list to the session and allows the user to select a single item, and you can specify a parameter to allow multiple items, and that's all there is. The project is used almost exclusively in user commands. It has a couple of advantages, the, for me, most important one being that it can be automated, meaning that you can call the function without a user sitting in front of the monitor. So in test cases, it would pass. Of course, it's good to have such a tool in order to provide the same user interface in user commands everywhere. So using it consistently has advantages. And finally, it can be interrupted. You certainly have noticed that you can't interrupt quote, quad, or quad with a strong or weak interrupt, which on modern machines can pose a significant problem. Because when you try to press enter and then to interrupt, there might be a couple of thousands of lines being executed in between. I'm using both Git and GitHub. And we've already established on day 1 that in the meantime, more than 50% of the people in this room are using Git and GitHub, apparently. For the others, I would like to point out that the main advantage of Git is really that you save a copy of your work whenever you commit your work, meaning you can go back in time, at least in theory. You are independent from a central server, and support between users is, collaboration between users is well supported. While GitHub is an online repository, that seems to contradict the earlier statement that no central server is required, but still true. You can use GitHub, but you don't have to, right? While Git is powerful, it suffers definitely from featureitis. Some of the documentation of the main commands take 20 pages or something, which is absolutely ridiculous. On the other hand, GitHub offers so many useful features that it makes up for the problems Git is posing. Right, let's get started. Over to APL. And this is a real demo, meaning I'm exposed to something might go wrong, of course. The first thing I'm going to do is this readable in the back? No. No. Well, let's make it bigger then. Is that readable? Could you scroll it up as well? Say again? Could you scroll it up so the text is nearer the top? I can reposition the session, of course. That should do, right? Yes. Okay. So the first step is to open the project. For that, I use a user command from the Cider project manager. I do not provide an argument, and for that reason, the command gives me a list of all projects it knows about, and I can select the one I'm interested in. In my case, that is CommTools 2. The 2 just indicates that I took a copy of the real thing and modified it to my demands. So I select number 4 and press enter. And in the next step, it asks me whether it should look for updated version of dependencies. I say no, because I know I'm up to date anyway, and then the project is established in the workspace and ready to be modified. As part of the open project function call, I get 2 windows. One of them is giving me the status of the project from Git's perspectives, and it tells me that it is on branch main. and it emphasizes with the box because we are not supposed to do any development work on main. And the second variable, well, the second window is looking at a variable to do, which lives in the root of the project. And if that variable exists and is not empty, it puts it on in the editor for display. It's a nice way to keep track of what you want to do without creating an issue. In other words, hide the embarrassing stuff in the workspace rather than publishing it on GitHub. We did this. And we get a list of branches, just main. We open the Git share, increase the font size, and create a new branch called dev. Now, what I just did is dangerous in principle, because if the branch that I've switched from had uncommitted changes, it would have warned me and I have to take care of. Operations like that are only advisable and can be performed without trouble when there are no files waiting to be committed or added, which is the case here, so I'm fine. Now, when I repeat list branches, I get 2 branches, and it tells me with the asterisk I'm currently on dev, which is what I want. I use the latest user command to give me a list of all changes on the last day any change took place. I could instead ask for the last 2 days, well, then it gives me a slightly longer list, which is a nice way to return to a project which I haven't abandoned yesterday, but 6 months ago, and I might have forgotten what I've done since. I can also ask for the statistics, which changes took place when. All this is now possible because we are using link. If we use latest technology, because we can get around the fact that defense and classes do not have timestamps. We just look at the disk and take the file stamp instead, and it works. So, in order to provide the work, I look at to do. It tells me that I'm supposed to exchange an APL expression by a function call. And the work has to be carried out in the namespace CommTools.testCases. So I jump into that namespace, and I use a user command snippets. Snippets is designed to save very small pieces of code, functions, operators on disk and bring them into the workspace if I want to. And everything that I use more than once, but that doesn't qualify for a package, is a potential candidate to become a snippet. Why is that not working? Rows on.
It needs box on as well. Do you have box on?
Sure? I don't think so, Adam. Anyway, I have to live with this. I've prepared a couple of snippets that start their names with CommTools hyphen, which is kind of a group name, and one of them is del pause. I'm not interested in showing how I would implement del pause, so I just bring number 5 into the workspace. It will ask me where to fix it and confirm the name, and it's there, I can use it. And it's doing exactly the same the pause function in CommTools would do, but this is about testing CommTools, so I wouldn't use CommTools to test CommTools. This is a recipe for problems. I use an independent function for this. And now I use FIRE, which stands for find and replace, and I've talked about in other sessions, in order to replace the APL expression by the function call, I give it 2 parameters. The first one is a dot, and the dot simply means look into the current namespace. And the second one is the expression I'm searching for, so it can pre-populate the GUI by saying look for the APL expression in the namespace CommTools.testCases. I press find, get a list, and the list tells me there are 12 hits in 11 objects, meaning one object has 2 hits. I can ask for a detailed report, and it tells me exactly where the APL expression pops up. And there are 3 problems. The first problem is, number 1 is a comment and not an APL expression. The second one is text and not an APL expression. Everything else is okay, except in this case we have 2 hits. One is what we want to replace, and the other one is, again, text. How to deal with this? There are several methods. We can use the context menu to reduce the list of hits, and that would be a nice way to get rid of test 1 and test 2. It wouldn't help with the 2 hits, because we can only remove the whole function. But there is a better way to do this in such a case. We can tell Fire not to look for comment and text and repeat the find operation. And now it says 9 hits in 9 objects, and we are fine. I press replace. I guess that there is a thread running from link. Well, I have no idea where that thread is coming from. Let's ignore that. It's amazing what can go wrong, right? And I tell Fire that I want to replace the APL expression by a function called pause. It will give me a detailed report of what it is going to do. Everywhere it tells me this expression is going to be replaced by this function call. I can still at this point untick one of the boxes saying, I changed my mind, I don't want to change that one. But in my case, everything is fine, so I press fix changes. And it warns me, but we have Git running in the background, so we are not worried about not having an undo. And Fire has told Link about the change, and Link realized that it is part of a namespace that it is supposed to watch, so it took care of it and saved all the changes on disk. I use APL git2.log to issue a command that gives me a list of all recent commits. Now, a commit is a save operation. It means the current status of my work is saved in Git, and it tells me what title was given to it when the last commit was performed, with the author, and it gives me a hash, and a hash is nothing but a fingerprint, which means it can be used to identify that particular commit, which is important. Under some circumstances, I use the user command APL git to compare commits, which usually takes 2 commits, so I could compare this commit with this one. Instead, I can provide just 1 commit, then it would provide the given commit with the latest one. So it takes a default in that case. Or I provide just a dot, which means it takes the current contents of the working directory and compares that with the last commit. In other words, I see my changes in a single file. And that's what we are going to do now. And I jump with Control N to the next hit, and you can see all the changes we just performed. I put on display. So I'm happy with that. And I commit my work with the title Introduce del pause into test cases by calling APL git2.commit. And now we have a clean working tree. And when we ask, I forgot something, right? There's that to-do variable, which told me what to do, and I should have either deleted it or reset it to empty. In my case, I deleted the contents, but I leave the variable. The effect will be the same. It won't be made it into the edit window when I reopen the project. But now there's a problem, because I would like that change to be part of the commit I've just committed, right? I forgot that. Luckily, I can get around this by calling commit again, but with the -amend flag, which means add everything I've changed right now to the latest commit. Did that really work? Well, I can check with log, and log tells me that from today there is still only a single commit. So I achieved exactly what I was after. And the second and last step is fixing a bug. For that, I issue the github.listissues command and tells it the group and the repository name. And that gives me a list of all issues that wait to be taken care of. The one I'm interested in is the number 1, automating select, because that is a bug. What I don't see here is any comments, which often are very important. I get around this by calling list issues with an additional flag -HTML, which simply means give me a full report. And it creates an HTML file, which I open with the user command open. Then the browser shows me all, even if it's a list with 600 issues, it would provide a list with all those issues in a single document, which is also nice to use Control F in order to find certain words. And there's a link, and if I click at that link, I get the comments as well. And whoever did this provided a test case, which is very nice, so I can copy that, go back to APL, and before I execute this, a remark. Normally, where's that 7 coming from? I must have hit something. Normally, I would run the test by calling a function run tests, but instead of running all the tests, lack of time, I am calling prepare, which creates an instance of the test framework called T, and then I call the method run these with a left argument 1 and gives it a group name and 2 test cases, number 8 and number 9, and we'll execute these 2 test cases. And the one provided as left argument simply mean stop just before the test case is really executed, so I can trace into it. It will then ask me whether I want a code coverage report. Yes, but it should add to the existing one. And there we are. The first test case works. The automating feature is used here by creating a variable select choices, which makes select return in a result without interacting with the user. But the second one, the test case failed, and the reason is it returns only a single element, while the list contains 2 lines that start with =6, and the expression was =6 wildcard, meaning it should have returned both, and it didn't. That's the bug we need to fix. In order to fix this, again, I have prepared something. I use snippets.fix again, and now I have a fixed version of select. When I execute this again, I pass the test. I can carry on. And the second test case will pass as well. Job done. So again, I can compare my changes, jump to the changed lines, and there are 3 lines in 2 blocks. The first block is when the asterisk is telling to look at the end, and the other one is telling, looking at the front of the expression. So that is fine. I commit my changes again. And final step is I need to change the function's version and the APL variable history. I've prepared them and bring them in with snippet fix again. Get them into the editor and add today's date. Same for the history variable. Fix both of them. Normally, I would now run the tests, all the tests, of course. I don't have the time, so I don't do this. I could call the user command code browser if I want to discuss the code with a colleague, called a code review, which gives me a complete list of all the code in the project with features like hiding, jumping, going back, going elsewhere. You can see why this has advantages for code reviewing. It makes it very pleasant. Finally, I will ask the project manager Cider to give me an APL statement in order to make a new version. I execute that function and I tell it to increase the version number. This version number comes from the package config file, so it's not identical with the function I've just changed in the workspace. It has created a new version. I commit my changes to Git. And normally I would now open a Git shell again and I would switch to main, merge my dev branch into main and push my main branch to GitHub, and the job would have been done. The next step would be to publish the package to the Tatin package manager, and the last step would be to close the issue we fixed, and that would be the final end of it. End of demo. So I have one more thing to do. My advice using Git commands from within APL is do only simple stuff. Otherwise, use a Git bash. The reason for that is sources refer to the Git bash. So when you read the Git documentation, or when you read one of the relevant books, or when you ask on Stack Overflow for advice, they all refer to the Git bash. If you're not familiar with this, you're on your own. So there's a good reason to do this. And also there's a word of advice what not to do, and that is to put several actions together that are potentially dangerous. Switching, for example, to branch main, merging dev into main and then pushing it, 3 actions in one go, is a recipe for disaster. Because things can go wrong, which we translate into things will go wrong. It's just a matter of time. And then APL appears to hang, because usually Git asks a question, but it's executed via quad sh. We don't see the question. Nobody knows what's going on. I've compiled a list for investigation with all the links. They will show in proper blue on your machine if you want to gather information about the user commands. Any questions?